I was sipping my afternoon tea when the words hit me like a physical blow. Rose sat across from me at my kitchen table, her phone face down after what I assumed was another failed brand deal. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the wood as she stared at me with that look I'd grown to dread. "Mom, your career is a joke," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You should quit and just walk dogs. At least then you'd be useful." The words hung in the air between us. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my face calm. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Setting down my teacup with steady hands, I met her gaze. "Is that so?" I asked quietly. Rose shrugged, already turning back to her phone. "I mean, what do you even do all day? Collect rent from a few old apartments? It's embarrassing when people ask what my mom does for work." I swallowed the hurt, the way I'd learned to swallow so many things over the years. If only she knew. If only she had any idea that the woman she just dismissed as worthless was sitting on $55 million. My name is Catherine Levington, and I'm 68 years old. I've spent my entire adult life building something most people never see coming. While others chase flashy careers and social media fame, I chose a different path. I became a property developer, but not the kind you see on reality TV shows. I work quietly, strategically. I buy buildings that others overlook, transform them into something valuable, and sell them to people who understand quality. Over the decades, this approach has made me wealthy beyond what most people could imagine. But I've never flaunted it. I drive a modest car, live in the same house I bought 30 years ago, and shop at regular grocery stores. I learned early that showing off your success only attracts the wrong kind of attention. Rose has always seen this as weakness. To her, success means followers, likes, and designer handbags. She looks at my quiet life and assumes I'm barely scraping by. The irony would be funny if it weren't so painful. She has no idea that the mother she just insulted could buy and sell her entire world without blinking. I wasn't always this careful with money. Growing up, my mother and I lived in a cramped 2-room apartment above a laundromat. The walls were thin, and I could hear our neighbors fighting about bills every night. Mrs. Patterson from next door once screamed at her husband for 3 hours because he'd spent their rent money on lottery tickets. "Keep your wins to yourself, Katie," my mother used to whisper to me when we counted out coins for groceries. "The moment people know you have something, they'll find a way to take it." I was 12 when I watched the Hendersons get evicted because they'd bragged about Mrs. Henderson's small inheritance. Suddenly, everyone knew they had money, and everyone had emergencies that needed that money. Within 6 months, it was gone, and so was their home. Those lessons stuck with me. Even after I made my first million, I kept living like I had before. When I made my 10th million, nothing changed. By the time I hit 50 million, the habit was so ingrained that I couldn't imagine living any other way. Unfortunately, this taught Rose that quiet meant poor. She never learned the difference between having nothing and choosing to appear that way. Rose's world revolves around appearances. Her Instagram feed shows a life of luxury that exists only in carefully staged photos. She borrows designer clothes, poses in expensive restaurants she can barely afford, and creates an image of success that's held together with credit cards and hope. Just last week, she'd called me crying because her boyfriend Leo had left her to pay their entire rent alone. She'd been counting on a sponsorship deal that fell through at the last minute. The company decided to go with someone who had more followers. "It's so unfair, Mom," she'd sobbed into the phone. "I work so hard, and nothing ever goes my way. Some people just get lucky, I guess." I'd wanted to help her, but every time I offered practical advice, she brushed it off. When I suggested she get a steady job to support her influencer dreams, she looked at me like I'd suggested she join a circus. "You don't understand," she'd said. "Regular jobs are for regular people. I'm building a brand." But her brand was built on quicksand, and I could see it crumbling. What hurt most was that she blamed everyone except herself, including me, for not being successful enough to help her more. A week after her cruel comment, Rose showed up at my house with flowers and an apologetic smile. I knew she needed something, but I let her in anyway. She was still my daughter, even when she acted like a stranger. "I'm sorry about what I said, Mom," she said, though her eyes were already scanning my living room. I was just stressed about work stuff. While I made us coffee, she wandered into my study. I heard her moving around, probably looking at my books and papers. When I brought the coffee in, she was standing by my desk, staring at a leather folder I'd left open. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the architectural blueprints inside. "Just a project I'm consulting on," I said, closing the folder casually. But I'd seen the look in her eyes. The blueprints showed a 12-building development worth millions. They weren't the kind of documents someone working with a few old apartments would have on their desk. Rose tried to act normal for the rest of the visit, but I could tell her mind was working. She asked casual questions about my work, fishing for information. I gave her vague answers, the way I always did. After she left, I realized I'd made a mistake. I'd given her just enough to make her curious. I bought my first property when I was 28. It was a rundown duplex in a neighborhood most people avoided. Everyone thought I was crazy, including my mother. But I saw potential where others saw problems. I spent 6 months working on that building. I learned plumbing from YouTube videos, taught myself tile work, and painted every wall myself. My hands were constantly dirty, my back ached every morning, and I questioned my sanity at least once a day. But when I sold it 2 years later for 3 times what I'd paid, I knew I'd found my calling. The money wasn't just profit, it was proof that patient work and smart choices could change everything. I reinvested every penny into the next property, then the next. I learned to spot value that others missed, to see through surface problems to the potential underneath. While my friends spent their money on vacations and new cars, I bought buildings. By the time I was 40, I owned 12 properties. By 50, I'd moved into commercial real estate. By 60, I was investing in entire developments. Rose knows none of this history. To her, I'm just a boring old woman who never took risks or dreamed big. Leo called Rose the day after her visit to my house. I only know this because she told me about it later, laughing as if it were a joke. "He thinks you're hiding money," she said, rolling her eyes. "Can you imagine? He says older people always have secret savings accounts." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. Leo had always struck me as opportunistic. He'd never held a steady job in the 3 years he'd been with Rose, always talking about his next big idea while living off her credit cards. "He wants to start a business," Rose continued, "something about cryptocurrency consulting. He says we just need startup capital." The pieces clicked together in my mind. Leo had put the idea in her head that I might have hidden resources. Now Rose was looking at me differently. Not just as a disappointment, but as a potential opportunity. I changed the subject quickly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She'd always been impulsive, but now she had a reason to be calculating. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in how she treated me. She was more attentive, more interested in my daily routine. She started visiting more often, always with some excuse about wanting to spend time together. 2 weeks later, Rose made her move. She arrived at my house with a business plan printed on expensive paper and a rehearsed speech about investment opportunities. "I need $10,000, Mom," she said, sliding the documents across my kitchen table. "It's not a loan. It's an investment in my future. My follower count is growing, and I just need capital to take things to the next level." I read through her proposal carefully. It was full of buzzwords and unrealistic projections. She wanted the money for professional photography, a new wardrobe, and what she called brand enhancement services. "This isn't a business plan, Rose," I said gently. "It's a wish list." Her face flushed red. "You don't understand social media marketing. This is how successful influencers operate. They invest in their image. With other people's money? With support from people who believe in them," she snapped. I thought my own mother might be one of those people. I explained my policy of only investing in ventures with proven returns and solid business models. Rose's plan had neither. She left angry, muttering about how I didn't value her dreams. But I could see this was just the beginning. She'd tested the waters and found them warmer than expected. My refusal hadn't discouraged her. It had confirmed that I had money to refuse. That evening, I attended the quarterly meeting of the Metropolitan Development Consortium. These gatherings happened at the Blackstone Club, where deals worth millions were discussed over dinner and wine. I sat quietly at my usual spot, listening as my colleagues shared updates on their projects. When it was my turn, I mentioned my latest acquisition, a downtown office complex that I plan to convert into luxury condominiums. 42 units, I said simply. Pre-sales start next month. The project represented 18 months of work and $7 million of investment. By the time it was complete, I'd likely double that investment. But I spoke about it the same way other people might discuss their grocery shopping. This was my real world, the one Rose had never seen. Here, I wasn't a joke or an embarrassment. I was a respected member of a community that shaped the city's skyline. After the meeting, Harrison Wells approached me. He'd been in commercial real estate for 30 years and had become something of a mentor. "You know, Catherine," he said, "your daughter has no idea what you've accomplished, does she?" I smiled sadly. "No, and I'm not sure she'd care if she did." "That's a shame," he said. "You've built an empire most men twice your age would envy." While I was building empires, Rose's world was collapsing. She lost 2 major sponsorship deals in 1 week. A makeup company dropped her because her engagement rates weren't high enough, and a clothing brand chose someone with more followers. Leo had moved out the month before, taking their shared savings account with him. Rose tried to downplay it, but I could see the stress in her face. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She started showing up at my house more frequently, always with some excuse. She'd offered to help with grocery shopping or cleaning, tasks she'd never shown interest in before. I appreciated the help, but I recognized the pattern. She was positioning herself as indispensable. During one visit, she spent an unusual amount of time in my home office, claiming she was looking for a book I'd mentioned. I found her standing in front of my filing cabinets, studying the labels on each drawer. "Just trying to understand your system," she said when I caught her. "You're so organized." But I knew she was mapping out my financial documents, looking for clues about my true situation. The hunt had begun in earnest. The breakthrough came when Rose was helping me clean out my storage closet. I'd asked her to sort through some old coats I was planning to donate. While I was in another room, I heard her gasp. "Mom, what's this?" she called out. I hurried back to find her staring at my wall safe, which had been hidden behind the coats. It was a small thing, maybe 18 inches square, but its presence clearly surprised her. "Just important documents," I said, quickly hanging a coat back over it. "Insurance papers, that sort of thing." Rose laughed, but it sounded forced. "I didn't know you had a safe. What kind of documents need that level of security?" I changed the subject, but I could see her mind racing. Later, after she left, I realized I'd made another mistake. Normal people don't keep insurance papers in wall safes. They keep valuable things in wall safes. That night, she called her friend Miranda. I only know this because Miranda's mother, Patricia, is in my book club. Patricia mentioned that Miranda had asked her about estate planning and whether older people typically kept large amounts of cash at home. The questions were too specific to be casual. Rose was building a theory about my finances, piece by piece. My career change at 47 had surprised everyone, including myself. I'd been successfully flipping residential properties for nearly 20 years when Harrison Wells offered me a partnership opportunity. "Commercial real estate is where the real money is, Catherine," he'd said over lunch. "You have the instincts for it." The transition meant selling all my rental properties and investing everything in a single downtown office building. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. The building was outdated, in a questionable neighborhood, and would require massive renovations. But I saw past the problems to the potential. The neighborhood was on the verge of gentrification, and the building had beautiful bones under its tired exterior. I spent 18 months and nearly everything I had making it perfect. When I sold it 3 years later, I'd made enough to buy 2 more buildings. Those led to 4 more, then 8. Within a decade, I was one of the most successful commercial developers in the city. The secret was patience and vision. While others chased quick profits, I played the long game. I bought buildings that would be perfect in 5 years, not 5 months. It was a lonely strategy, but it was effective. By the time other developers noticed what I was doing, I owned half the buildings in the city's most desirable districts. Rose's financial situation was getting desperate. She'd maxed out 3 credit cards and was behind on her rent. Her landlord had given her a final notice, and she was facing eviction within the month. She started asking me strange questions during our visits. They seemed casual, but I could hear the calculation behind them. "Have you ever thought about writing a will, Mom?" she asked one afternoon while we were gardening. "Why would you ask that?" "Oh, I just read an article about how important estate planning is, especially for people with property and investments." Another time, she asked about my retirement plans. "Are you saving enough? I worry about you being able to maintain your lifestyle." I gave vague answers, but I could see her frustration growing. She wanted concrete information about my finances, and I wasn't providing it. The questions became more frequent and less subtle. She asked about life insurance, property values, and whether I had any hidden assets she should know about in case of emergency. I realized she was building a case for why she deserved access to my money. She was positioning herself as a concerned daughter worried about my financial security, when really, she was the one in trouble. The smoking gun came when Rose was looking for wrapping paper in my office closet. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard papers rustling. By the time I got there, she was back to searching through gift wrap, but I noticed my desk drawer was slightly open. Later, after she left, I checked what was missing. Nothing was gone, but I found fingerprints on a property tax statement I'd left in the drawer. The document showed the assessed value of my downtown office building, $8.2 million. Rose had seen it. She'd probably photographed it while I was out of the room. That evening, she called me with unusual excitement in her voice. "I was thinking about our conversation earlier," she said. "About estate planning and all that. Maybe I could help you organize your paperwork? You know, just to make sure everything's in order." I declined politely, but I knew the game had changed. She'd found proof that I owned property worth millions, not the modest apartments she'd imagined. Over the next few days, I noticed her behavior shift again. She was more attentive, more affectionate. She started bringing me small gifts and calling more frequently to check on my health. She was no longer just curious about my finances. She was actively working to secure her position in my life. The Children's Hospital Foundation Gala was one of my favorite annual events. I'd been supporting their work for 15 years, always anonymously. My donations had helped fund a new pediatric wing and several research programs. This year, I pledged $200,000 to their scholarship fund. The amount didn't strain my finances, but it would change dozens of young lives. Watching the foundation president announce the donation without mentioning my name filled me with quiet satisfaction. I'd learned early that public philanthropy attracted the wrong kind of attention. People who donated for recognition were usually people who wanted something in return. I gave because it felt right, not because it looked good. On the drive home, I thought about Rose. Her generation seemed to believe that nothing counted unless it was documented and shared. The idea of doing good quietly was foreign to her. If she knew about my charitable giving, she'd probably be furious. In her mind, that money should go to family first. She'd never understand that helping strangers gave me more joy than buying designer handbags or expensive vacations. The foundation sent me a thank you letter the next week. I filed it away with all the others, a private record of the good my money had done. Rose's strategy became clear over the next month. She appointed herself as my unofficial caregiver, showing up unannounced to check on my health and help with daily tasks. She started posting photos of us together on her social media, always with captions about how much she loved taking care of her mom. The comments were full of praise for her devotion, which only encouraged her to do more. "You're so lucky to have such a caring daughter," strangers wrote. "Family is everything," she'd reply. I couldn't imagine leaving Mom to handle everything alone. The irony was painful. For 20 years, she'd barely tolerated spending time with me. Now suddenly, she was the devoted daughter, but only because she suspected I had money. Her helpfulness came with strings attached. She'd reorganize my papers while cleaning, always asking questions about what different documents meant. She'd offer to drive me to appointments, then linger in waiting rooms, listening to conversations with my lawyer or accountant. She was gathering intelligence, building a comprehensive picture of my financial situation, and she was creating a public record of her dedication, probably for future legal purposes. The confrontation came during lunch at my favorite cafe. Rose had been unusually quiet, picking at her salad while I ate my soup. Finally, she set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said. "Kids should be part of their parents' financial decisions. I mean, what if something happened to you? I wouldn't even know where to start." I kept my voice calm. "I have everything well organized, dear. My lawyer handles all the complex matters." "But that's exactly what I mean," she pressed. "I should know who your lawyer is, what accounts you have, what properties you own. It's just good planning." The word properties told me she knew more than she was letting on. This wasn't a conversation about emergency preparedness. It was a negotiation for access. "I prefer to handle my own affairs," I said firmly. Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw raw frustration underneath. "That's not fair, Mom. Other parents include their children in these decisions. They want their kids to understand the family finances. And what would you do with that information?" She looked startled by the direct question. "Nothing. I just think it's important for family to be transparent with each other." But we both knew that wasn't true. My health scare happened on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing contracts in my study when the room started spinning. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed with Rose holding my hand. "Thank God you're okay," she said, tears in her eyes. "The neighbor found you collapsed in your hallway. The doctors ran tests for 2 days, but found nothing serious. They said it was likely dehydration combined with low blood sugar." I felt foolish for not taking better care of myself. Rose never left my side. She slept in the hospital chair, brought me books from home, and charmed all the nurses with her attention to my needs. She posted regular updates on social media, documenting her vigil. "Praying for my amazing mom," read one post. "She's the strongest woman I know." The comments poured in with support and praise for Rose's devotion. She seemed to glow under the positive attention, but I noticed she was also watching everything carefully. She listened when doctors discussed my care, took notes when nurses mentioned medications, and asked detailed questions about my medical history. She was learning everything she could about my health and life expectancy. When we left the hospital, she insisted on staying with me for a week, just to be safe. During Rose's stay at my house, I had a conference call with my estate planning attorney. I thought I was being discreet, taking the call in my study with the door closed. But Rose had excellent hearing and a talent for being in the right place at the wrong time. I was discussing updates to my trust when I heard footsteps in the hallway. The conversation was nearly over, but I'd mentioned transferring additional properties into the trust structure. When I emerged from the study, Rose was in the kitchen making coffee, humming softly. She seemed completely innocent, but I noticed she avoided eye contact. That evening, she asked casual questions about trusts and estate planning. "I was watching a documentary about wealthy families," she said. "It's fascinating how they structure their finances. Do you know much about that stuff?" I gave her a general explanation, but I could see her mind working. The word trust had clearly caught her attention during my phone call. Over the next few days, I noticed her researching trusts on her phone. She thought she was being subtle, but I caught glimpses of articles about inheritance law and family wealth management. She was preparing for something, but I wasn't sure what yet. The revelation came at Sunday dinner with old family friends. The Wheelers had been close to my late husband and me for 40 years. They knew about my success because they'd watched me build it from the beginning. We were reminiscing about the early days when Frank Wheeler laughed and said, "Remember when you bought that first commercial building, Catherine? We thought you were crazy to risk everything." "Best decision I ever made," I replied. "I'll say," his wife Betty chimed in. $55 million later, you're proof that taking calculated risks pays off." The room went silent. I saw Rose's fork freeze halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Betty, realizing what she'd revealed, looked mortified. "Oh my goodness," Betty stammered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think." It's fine, I said calmly, but my heart was racing. Rose set down her fork with trembling hands. 55 million, she whispered. Frank Wheeler tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but the damage was done. Rose stared at me as if she'd never seen me before. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Rose barely spoke, her mind clearly spinning with this new information. When we got home, she was unusually quiet. We should talk, she finally said. Rose waited 2 days before making her move. She arrived at my house Tuesday morning with a determined expression and a folder full of printed articles about inheritance law. I've been thinking about what Betty said, she began, settling into my living room chair as if she owned it. $55 million is a lot of money, Mom. I poured myself tea and waited for her to continue. I think it's only fair that I get half, she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. I've been your emotional support for years. I've kept you from being lonely, helped you through difficult times. I've earned a place in your financial future. The audacity took my breath away, but I kept my expression neutral. Have you? Yes, she said firmly. I've sacrificed opportunities to stay close to home and take care of you. I could have moved to Los Angeles years ago to pursue bigger influencer opportunities, but I stayed here for you. This was news to me. She'd never mentioned Los Angeles opportunities, and she'd certainly never acted like my caretaker until she suspected I had money. I think half is reasonable, she continued. It's not like you need $55 million. You live so simply. What are you saving it all for? I sipped my tea slowly, letting her words hang in the air. You want me to give you $27 million? Not give, she corrected. I want you to acknowledge my contribution to your life and plan accordingly. When I didn't immediately agree to her demands, Rose escalated. She returned the next day with threats wrapped in concern. I've been talking to a lawyer, she said, pulling out her phone to show me search results. Apparently, children can challenge wills if they feel they've been unfairly excluded from their parents' estate. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice steady. Are you threatening me? I'm protecting myself, she replied, and I'm protecting our relationship. I don't want us to end up in court fighting over this. I'd rather we work it out now while we can still be civil. She showed me articles about successful will contests, particularly cases where children had proven they'd provided care for elderly parents. Every article she'd saved seemed carefully chosen to support her case. I just want what's fair, Mom. I'm not asking for everything, just my share. Half seems reasonable for your only child. I listened to her argument, noting how she'd researched the legal angles and prepared her strategy. This wasn't an emotional plea, it was a calculated negotiation. I think you should get your own lawyer, I said finally. Her confident expression faltered. Why would I need a lawyer if we're just talking? Because you've made this a legal matter, I replied. And legal matters require legal advice. The meeting ended with Rose storming out, but I knew she'd be back. She'd shown her hand and now I needed to play mine. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Victoria Nash. We'd worked together for 15 years, and she knew my wishes regarding my estate. After I explained the situation, she was ready with solutions. We can restructure everything, she said during our meeting the next day. Create an ironclad trust that protects your assets and ensures they go where you want them to go. We spent 3 hours reviewing my options. Most of my wealth would go to carefully chosen charities, with smaller amounts designated for friends and colleagues who had genuinely supported me over the years. Rose would receive $200,000, enough to pay off her debts and start fresh, but nowhere near the windfall she expected. This structure makes it impossible for her to contest, Victoria explained. The trust is legally bulletproof, and the charitable designations show clear intent. I also established a scholarship fund in my late husband's name, something I'd been planning for years, but had never finalized. Your daughter won't be able to touch any of it, Victoria assured me. And more importantly, you'll know your money is going to causes that matter to you. By the end of the week, everything was signed and notarized. My fortune was safe from Rose's schemes. Rose's lawyer delivered the news on a rainy Thursday morning. She called me immediately afterward, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. 200,000? She screamed into the phone. That's it? After everything I've done for you? It's more than enough to start over, I said calmly. This is insane, Mom. I'm your daughter. I deserve half of everything you have. Her lawyer had apparently told her the same thing Victoria had told me. The trust was unbreakable. There was no legal path to the fortune she'd been counting on. The next day, she arrived at my house one final time. This visit was different from the others. She came with tears instead of threats, desperation instead of demands. I feel so unloved, she sobbed in my living room. How could you give away everything to strangers and leave me with almost nothing? For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. She was still my daughter, and seeing her cry brought back memories of comforting her as a child. But then I remembered her cruelty, her schemes, her threats. She didn't love me. She loved my money. And now that she couldn't have it, she was trying one last manipulation. My love for you has never changed, I said gently. But money isn't how love is measured. She left that day and didn't come back. 6 months later, I was walking my rescue dog, Bailey, along the ocean at sunrise. The beach was empty except for a few joggers and the seagulls searching for breakfast. Bailey found a stick and brought it to me eagerly. I threw it toward the waves, watching him bound after it with pure joy. There was something perfect about his simple happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, confirming that the first scholarship checks had been sent out. 20 young people would be able to attend college because of my money. That felt like a better legacy than anything Rose had planned. I thought about her comment all those months ago. You should quit and just walk dogs. At least then you'd be useful. Here I was, walking my dog by choice, not necessity. I was doing it because it brought me peace, not because someone else decided it was all I was good for. Bailey returned with his stick, tail wagging furiously. I scratched behind his ears and threw it again, smiling as he raced toward the surf. I'd protected my fortune, my dignity, and my peace of mind. Rose could say whatever she wanted about my career or my choices. I knew what I'd built, and I knew what it was worth. Most importantly, I knew it was safe from anyone who would use it to hurt others the way she had tried to hurt me.